You guys don't want us to read, do you?
Hello.
Hi, good morning. Good morning.
Ray and I got here like 5 minutes ago, so we're a little still like cold and snowy. Thank you guys for joining us this morning.
Sweet. Well, I just want to say first, congratulations to Sean on his Vanguard Award last night. I got to meet Sean kind of after the blitz of all the well-deserved recognition for his movies, the Oscar nominations, and it's like, it is so hard to do that at any time in your career, let alone on your first foray, your first film. So it's just been remarkable to see your journey so far and just how you've handled it. I'd love to just talk about how you're feeling, what you're doing now.
Yeah.
How has it been? How's the journey to this point?
I mean, this entire last year has been just so surreal. You know, I've been a fan of Ray's for a long time, and you know, we met in March, so it was after the movie premiered, but before it had come out. And so it was sort of like, I think, and now, you know, we're definitely on the tail end of releasing the movie, and the movie just kind of, you know, did everything I ever dreamt that it would do. But it does feel like I have a different relationship to the movie now than, you know, when we met. And but just to be back at Sundance, which really feels like a community now for me and like a home, but to kind of be back and be like, wow, we were kind of talking about like, I don't feel like I'm gonna throw up because I have to premiere a movie. I don't feel like super anxious, and so I feel like I grew up and like I'm like back at Sundance as an adult, but I still look like a kid.
I remember being here and like my movie hadn't even premiered and everyone was asking me what's next. And it was like, well, what's next is my movie tonight. Like, but everybody wants to know kind of what's next. So I'm sure you're getting a lot of what's next. So what is next?
I'm sure you still get it, right? Like as soon you spend like, you know, from beginning to end, DD, I was doing a million other things at the same time, but it was like I lived with it all throughout my 20s. It was like a 7-year journey. And you're like, wow, 7 years, like, and you're about to premiere. It's like, what's next? I'm like, dude, I just had a baby, you know, kind of like, and it's sort of like, but yeah, I think it's special to know that people are interested in what's next. And you know, I'm writing the next thing that I'm excited to get off the ground. I'm excited. It's an idea I had before DD, but as I was writing, I was like, oh, it's too big for a first movie. So I kind of tabled it, and as soon as we wrapped the movie, I was like, I think I want to go make that other one. And so it's the first time in my career that I'm also getting sent scripts and sort of considering adapting things. And so I'm, you know, reading stuff and considering like, oh, do I want to, you know, attach myself to this? But I think my ethos has always been to be self-generative and sort of, you know, the same thing I asked myself with DD, which was like, what am I feeling? You know, if I kind of shut out the noise and sort of like, what am I curious about? What am I feeling? And how do we take those feelings? And what is the container for the movie? And if I don't find anything that I'm able to sort of explore those kind of deep questions that are sort of buzzing inside me, like I'll write it. And so that's kind of the ethos I have. It's like, I'm going to write this thing and nothing pops up. I'll just do that. But if something does, I'll just go do that real quick and then come back.
Yeah, and look, you're such a singular voice, and that it is hard to watch something and you're just like, that is so you. And I feel like whatever the next thing it is that you're doing, I know I'm going to be watching a movie made by you, and I hope that whatever path you take, that is the thing. And so it as someone that's been there before, who didn't necessarily write his second feature, who kind of went on and started to direct for hire, like, holding on to that voice, I know, is so important. So it's like we are so looking forward to whatever you do decide to do next. We just want you to do it a lot faster so we could see it faster. So yeah. Anyway, can you talk a little bit about last night, like the award and like what it meant, and yeah, like the speech? I wasn't there. Does anybody see the speech last night? He's gonna redo the speech.
Yeah,
okay?
It was too long. It was too long.
7
I had
minutes.
notes. It was too long. No, I mean, it was special, you know, and we were honoring Michelle Satter, who like has been such an incredible supporter, and like I'm so grateful for her and just the labs too, the lab that she sort of, the Sundance Labs, for those of you who don't know. And I think like, you know, I mean, we kind of talked about how, you know, like the movies, there's sort of like the hustler mentality, and I feel like as a young filmmaker, you do kind of just have to be like, you have your guard up and you put your walls up and you're like, I'm gonna sort of plow through and I'm gonna get this movie made no matter what. And you do kind of have to develop this sort of thick skin. But so much of filmmaking too, and being a great filmmaker, we were talking about this in the car, sort of like unleashing your heart and making sure you can be vulnerable and sensitive. And those two things don't often go together. And it was at the labs where I felt like, as a filmmaker, a young filmmaker who had like a chip on his shoulder, it was like, I have something, I promise I have something to offer. It was like, you don't have anything to prove here. You know, like you're enough. Like, and like that whole team, whether it's like Michelle, Elise, Shira, and the labs just kind of, I think, gave me this sort of like inner sense of confidence. I was like, oh, I don't need to like put on all the time. Like, I remember even at the lab, the director's lab, you know, sometimes you're like, oh, like, am I a director? Like, what does a director act like? And someone was like, you're a little mischievous. And I was like, oh. And he was like, no, that's good. Like, that's who you are. That's your voice. Don't run away from it. You know, especially for this movie, like it's a sort of irreverent, crass movie at times. Like, you need to learn how to play. Like, if you kind of suppress your playfulness, you're gonna do a disservice to your movie. And I think it was that, just kind of like who you are is your movie. Don't look out here, like look. And I think I really got that confidence and that sort of eureka, I guess, like from Sundance and the sort of labs and the sort of community that has sort of like they fostered here. So yeah, to be back is like really cool.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think I came here in 2009. My brother had a short film, and it was the first time I had ever come to the festival, and so it was a full circle moment to kind of come back with my own short feature and now the jury. But it's a lot better being on this side.
So it was 9 years between the short and the feature.
My brother's short, yes.
Brother's short.
I count his as mine, you know. You know, I probably wrangled cables or like made someone a tuna fish sandwich or something on that set. So yeah, whatever he did, it's our family. So yeah, it was 9 years, which is kind of amazing to come back here. But like, you know, we were talking about it. My very first feature, you know, you pour all this money into film school and you make your movie and you think you get to Sundance and it's like, wow, I made it, and then the like reviews remind you that you didn't. So it's super humbling, but it was also like, okay, what do you do now? Like, you know, how do you get up from this? How do you battle from this? You can't, you know, not everybody's gonna love your movie. You have to find a way to kind of continue to make what you want. So yeah, it's just a true honor to be on this side. And, you know, I know what the filmmakers are going through when they're seeing their first films. And I try to watch the films with that kind of lens, knowing just kind of how much effort they put into it.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. So anyway, I'm sure that there's a lot of filmmakers here, a lot of, you know, aspiring filmmakers, a lot of aspiring screenwriters. I always like to just talk about how do we get them from where they're sitting right now to the next level, whatever that is for them. You know, what is that next step? Whether it's a short, whether it's getting to the feature, and I always think they're pretty simple kind of steps. But I'm curious, from your perspective, having made your first film, gone through that process, like what are some simple, like everyday kind of practical things, practical advice you can give to kind of the young filmmakers out here about like how they go about getting to that next step?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious the answer for you too, but just a show of hands, like how many people in here are filmmakers or like trying to get? Okay, so cool. Inside baseball. Well, I think, you know, I don't know, this is hard advice, but I think for me, the thing I kept sort of like asking myself with the first, I mean, I think like we work in an industry that's all about, unfortunately, numbers and precedents. And I think as a first-time filmmaker, you're just a risk. You're a liability. You're like, you need to invest in me to do something I've never done before. Like, that's just, as a small business investment, that is a bad investment. And so you kind of just have to look at what you have to offer. And I think so much of our movie was, obviously, there was a sort of creative thing inside me and something personal I wanted to express. But, like, how are you selling yourself? What makes this story and you, as someone who's never directed a movie, the perfect person to tell this story? And I think I was always kind of looking at my own narrative as a filmmaker to be like, you know, I worked at Google for like 6 years before making this movie, and that's how a lot of the technology of our, for those of you who've seen our movie, there's a lot of screens, and that's kind of how that all got integrated. And I was making a lot of shorts about my family and about my friends and adolescence. And so I think, my whole thing was like, if you read this script, you're not going to go find another director to do it. Like, I'm clearly the perfect director for this, even though I've never directed a movie before. And we were talking in the car about, Destin, Daniel Cretton, and Ryan Coogler and their first movies. And I remember watching Fruitvale Station and Short Term 12 really, really closely together in 2013. And I was already wanting to be a filmmaker at that time, but I wasn't sure if feature films were something that was like I was allowed to do, So I was like, I didn't know any other filmmakers. Movies to me, I loved movies, but they always felt so big and inaccessible, and I couldn't see through the cracks of how it was put together. But seeing those two movies sort of back to back, and sort of being able to see through the cracks and being like, they have a camera, they have great actors, and it's so deeply emotional. I was like, who are these people? How do they put this together? This looks low budget, not in a bad way, but just like it doesn't look like you needed UFOs and explosions to make you feel something. And I think all my favorite movies, whether the size or scale, is like if I feel something, I'm like, oh, that's what I want to do. And so I remember looking up Short Term 12 and then finding I Am Not a Hipster and like reading about how he wrote Short Term 12, couldn't get the money to make it because they were like, you've never directed a movie before. So he took the money from the Nicole Grant Fellowship, took that like $40,000, made I Am Not a Hipster just to make Short Term 12. I was almost like, well, I don't want to do that. I was going to try and write the script where I'm like, you should just direct this, first go. And so I think you have to kind of do that mental strategy of like, why am I the perfect person to direct this? As somebody who has never had any precedence. And I think we have to do that every day anyways, so yeah. I don't know if that's helpful.
No, for sure. I mean, I know for me, like, I think we're like our own worst enemy, but, there's a lot of people that are going to tell you that you can't or that you shouldn't. And I usually try to stay away from those people. If that's the first words that come out of your mouth, I'm like, that's not, even if it ends up being true, like, I want to explore all the avenues as to why it's possible first. And, you just got to be careful with that circle that you build around yourself, because you do need some level of encouragement. And of course you need people to tell you and be real about certain things, but you also need to like listen to that voice inside yourself. And if something's telling you, despite all the other naysayers, that like you should do it, should probably do it. Because if I had listened, and look, I loved NYU and I loved, all the teachers, but if I listened to them, I wouldn't have made anything. And that's just the reality. Like, they were trying to protect me. It's like your parent that says, you can't, no, like, don't do it. And then you're like, well, I have to go. I have to make these mistakes. I have to go out and try to do it despite you not wanting me to break my curfew or whatever. I'm not, so I think, everything.
They broke curfew.
Yeah, I broke curfew to make my first movie. I definitely went out too early, but it was good. I was glad that I did it. And, it's hard to kind of listen to that inner voice. And I still struggle with that. I mean, it's definitely something that always comes back. You make that one thing, and then you're like, you're only as good as the next thing that you're doing, which is actually right in front of you. And I think that's sort of the challenge that I find, oftentimes when I talk to young filmmakers about, well, what should I be doing? You should be doing the thing you said you wanted to do. It's like, you want to write, you have to write. You're talking about writing, but you're not actually writing. And like, how do you stay focused? Like, how do you shut the meetings out? Everybody wants to meet Sean, right? Oh my God, Sean, come, like, you just did this, you did this. Like, could you have a coffee? Could you help me? Like I'm sure your time is so limited, but like, how do you manage like being able to give yourself and be an inspiration, but also like just do the thing you need to do?
I mean, I'm sure you deal with that way more than I do. I think I do feel like I think I look at this movie that we made, and I think about how many people went out of their way to just like help out, whether it's reading drafts, like their creative selflessness, and like the fact that they sort of paid it forward, and I was the like lucky recipient of like, I want to help this kid. And I remember someone joked that they were like, you have the longest special thanks in your movie that I've ever seen. It's like 2 minutes of runtime. And I was just like, I know, but I can't cut, like, every one of these names gave something so important to the movie over 7 years when, like, I had nothing to offer them in return. You know, I was just like, dude, I don't know how to make a movie. Like, please, anyone out there. And so I do feel now, like, I still feel like I don't really know anything. I'm figuring it out as I go. But, like, if I can be helpful in any way, like, I tried to be helpful, but you know, I'm curious for you, like after your first movie, like what gives you, like you've made 5 movies now, right? And a lot of TV.
Yeah,
Four
films.
4 films. Like what is the buzz that you get now? And I'm also curious, like I think a lot about how so much of how we made DD, and I think what made it special was just like not knowing the right way to do things, like having never made a movie before and just being like, let's not try to figure out the right way to do things. Let's just do things the way that we feel good and what feels right to us, because I think if we follow the way that's like traditionally correct, especially in our genre, I think it'll just feel lukewarm. And I would much rather take a huge swing and like hit a home run or take a huge swing and miss, because if we make something lukewarm, no one's going to see it anyway. And I think I look at the movie and I'm like, I know why people don't do that now, but we did that and we didn't know it was like a bad choice to do that until it was like too late. And I'm curious what your relationship to, like, now that you have made a lot of things and you know the technical sort of vocabulary is probably so much bigger, what do you find things that you don't know, and like what are you chasing?
All the time. I mean, I think, you know, we're constantly just going back to the beginning of like, okay, I think I learned something on that experience, and then what was it? You know, like you're just looking at the mistakes. I grew up an athlete, so I kind of treat, you know, my career as like a baseball player, and baseball players fail, you know, 7 times out of 10, and they're Hall of Famers. You know, you really can't do that in film. You know, I think. Maybe if you made 3 classics, you know, like if you made like Thelma and Louise, I think you could fail a lot. But yeah, like I think I've always treated myself as like an athlete. Like every year, I've got to, you know, I've got another game. I've got to get better, and I'm just trying to get my on base percentage a little higher than I did last. And I'm trying to work on fundamentals. That's the way I think about it. It's like, okay, every movie is back to the fundamentals. It's back to my voice. And so, you know, like I get incoming scripts or I'm developing my own stuff. And I think I get the jobs that I've gotten not just as a director, I've gotten them as almost as a writer. So when I go in, and I'm sure you guys will have dealt with this, we often have to pitch on the next job that we're doing. And there's an art or whatever to pitching. There's like you go in and you're trying to get the job, but so is 50 other filmmakers. And it's like, why are they going to give you the job and not the other job? And I've always said to myself in those scenarios, like, I'm pitching the version of the movie that I want to make, not the version that they want to hear. And hopefully those two things align. And it just doesn't always happen, but I think many people go into them trying to pitch. It's like hitting a moving target. This is what they want to hear, so let me give them that version, versus just like, this is the movie I want to make because this is what I can bring to this thing. And so I've always tried to like think about my career and to like, if I'm gonna lend myself to a project, every project for me is, if it's a film, it's 3 years. That's 3 years that I'm gonna be away from my family, in and out. Of course, I bring my family with me, but like that's 12 to 15 hours on set. My kids are getting me tired on the weekend. Like every job has to be created with that lens. Like my family's gonna go on this journey with me and it's gonna be tough for them. So I better love, I don't care if it's Marvel or DC or comedy or horror, whatever that is, like I have to believe in that thing, even if it's just made up in my mind, because otherwise I can't justify it. You know, I've got kids. I can't justify what I do, and we don't make enough. You know, we just go into finance if you wanted to make money. This is a creative endeavor. This is something that it's passionate about. This is something that you're trying to create, and that's the kind of, I don't know, true north that I'm constantly trying to find in any of these projects that I've been a part of. I've just been lucky. And I'm also like a little, what do you call someone that doesn't believe they're still working? There's like a...
Imposter
imposter syndrome. Yeah, totally like, I'm never going to work again every project.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm always looking to stay on the field, stay active, get reps, constantly be active, but you know, always listening to that voice that you said, which is like, how can you be singular in this and whatever that is if you're not creating it, right? This is someone else's idea, but I have to bring a singular voice to that idea, and that's always, you know, kind of guided me to where I am now. So,
Did you have a lot of imposter syndrome after your first movie premiered? Because like I feel like there's this the vocabulary that people use in this industry of like your debut feature, you've arrived. Like people are like, how you've arrived? I'm like, I have a lot to learn. You know, like I feel like I'm still a student. I feel like I'm always going to be a student. And I think again, like you have a lot to give back now that you have gone through this, you know, this experience. And I definitely, you know, just like the 25 days of shooting the movie and making it, I feel like I learned more in those 2 months than I did in the last 13 years of making stuff. But I do feel like, again, like I still have a lot to learn. Like as a director, you know, I've only really been on set like 45 days in my life, right? You need those reps. And so, yeah, I'm curious how you sometimes, I remember I was in a general meeting one time and it was just, you know, right after Sundance, right after the Oscar nom. And I was still like, whoa, that was crazy. And it was like a general meeting. He was like, have you gotten used to the gap yet of how you see yourself and how others are now seeing you? And I was like, dude, what? I was like, this is too deep for you know what I mean? Of just like, but it is that thing of like, if I was a young filmmaker and I saw someone at Sundance, like all like win Sundance and get nominated for an Oscar in the same, I would be like, holy shit, like I want to hear from that person. But I don't see myself that way. I'm still like, I want to hear from Ray, you know? And so it is this sort of like, how did you kind of, you know, go forward from that?
I guess, yeah, because I have imposter syndrome, I never, but I guess it was just always about the work. It was never about the award, you know? And I was grateful for any award, like if I was able to, you know, achieve some sort of milestone with an award or something like that. But I never was like, oh, I'm gonna wait to like see what these awards do to open up. I was always like, let me just go continue to work. And if those awards come, great. You know, maybe I have to miss an award ceremony because I'm actually working. Like I'm not gonna
Best reason to
stop my life. I'm not gonna stop pursuing the thing that I actually just wanted to do, which was to make films. You know, and I always feel so lucky because you don't know when that's gonna end. You know, am I ever gonna be able to do this again? It is so hard, even for the successful filmmakers to make other movies. And I've spoken to, you know, legends. I've spoken to Ridley Scott and Spike Lee, who still talk about the challenges of making movies or making the movies that they really wanted to make. And some of them still haven't made it. And they're like, well, no, I know I made things, but, and so you're like, wait, you're Ridley Scott. You can do, look, what? You still have regrets about some movie that you didn't get made? It's incredible, but they do. And I think it's that hunger, it's that passion to remain a student, to remain hungry, to remain, like you said, like I'm constantly learning. Like I don't feel like I've achieved anything. I've just gotten to a place where I'm maybe lucky enough to continue to make something. And I know that, like, I don't take that for granted. I'm like, wow, somebody wants to give me money. Like I have to try to protect that. I have to try to grow that. And I feel that. I feel like I'm I don't know, a teacher or student in some ways, right? I'm like your teacher student. You're constantly learning and you're constantly trying to give that knowledge as you're getting it. And I think that's it. It's like trying to master that balance of like, I've learned something, how do I share it? And then how do I get more of that? I don't know. I'm still learning. I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, always learning, always learning. Yeah, well, I mean, like, if you were to give me advice or anyone else, like, what's your advice for I gave my version of it, but.
I mean, you're here. That's definitely the, like, first thing. You're already doing the thing, and I think just believe in that. And I think a lot of people don't, they think, should I go? It's the $200, I mean, I was broke, probably more broke than all of you. So, you know, whenever I meet kids in the hood, they're like, you know, I don't know if I could go to films. I'm like, yeah, you didn't have $330,000 worth of debt and no mom and dad to not give it to you. So, like, you're already in an advantageous position. So to me, it's like, just believe in the voice. You don't need to ask your friend if the shirt looks good. You know if it does. you know, we're always so quick to like want other people to like hold us and make sure it's okay. It's like just look in the mirror and do the thing that like is speaking to you. Try your best to like listen to that little voice inside, because it's constantly talking to you, and we're constantly trying to suppress it for whatever reason. That's what we do as humans. It's like, no, we can't be beautiful. No, I can't look good. I can't be good. There's so many other better people out here. I'm never gonna win an Oscar. Like there's just these voices that are constantly just telling you the world is stacked against you. And it's like, and if you believe those voices, it's never gonna happen. And it's like, you have to listen to that little voice. And whatever your discipline is, whether it's film or you wanna be a producer, like a writer, like there's no one path to it. It's your path. You know, it's like, I can't just like, this person did this. I remember with my very first film, I was making a triptych. So I was like, whoa, what are the other triptychs that I was like, so Amoros Perros. I was like, I love that movie. I want to make a movie like Amoros Perros. I bought the book and I started writing my script. I was like, okay, on page 5, there's an accident, like right here. And I wrote my script and I was like, this is awful. Like my movie doesn't fit into this structure. And so, but that didn't mean that structure didn't inspire my movie. And so I was just like, okay, I have to get rid, like that was their journey. That journey inspired my journey, but it's not my journey. And I have to figure out what that is for me. I have to go into that. And that place can be dark. I would just say, just do it in a light room. You know, like be lonely, like with some light, you know, try to like surround yourself with love and positivity and energy, whatever that is for you, whether that's meditation or family or friends, but like, and there's a lot of like negative voice, whether that's social media or online. Like you have to kind of know if those things are like dragging you down and making you feel a certain way, and like listen to those feelings and like, oh, I feel kind of generally terrible today. You should probably question why. And like, is that your circle? Is it what I'm doing? Is it how I'm talking to myself? And just try to like, well, how do I just get that a little bit better? How do I like have a better day tomorrow than I did today? And that could just be like, oh, I'm just gonna spend the $6 on coffee instead of $3. Whatever that is for you, those little creature comforts, those little things that make you feel like, I don't know, you're just improving as a human being, which then goes into your work. I mean, would you say the same? I'm like, what is your approach to that kind of, yeah, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, I mean, that was so eloquent. They said we have 5 minutes, but I think, you know, I resonate so much with what you're saying there, because I do feel like when I was younger and I was like, oh man, like I want to make it in this industry. And I think when you're young and once you decide you want to make a career out of this, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine of like, I think fear is such a big part of any filmmaker's process. If you're not scared, I would love a masterclass in that. But I don't think when I first started making things, I was scared ever. You know, it was like making skate videos was fun, and you know, making little stupid things with your friends was fun. And then all of a sudden, fear became a part of the equation, because I wanted a career, because I wanted to sort of break in and do this thing for a living. And then I think once that becomes a part of the equation, you do start looking like, well, how did people make a career out of it? And you start looking outside about how, and I do love looking at other directors and how they, you know, their career trajectories, what they did after their first feature. But I do think like so much of what, you know, the advice I got that was like true, but also very nebulous, was like, you have to find your voice. And I was like, oh, I would be like, yes, I do. How do I do that? And I realized, you know, maybe in this last year that like kind of what you were saying, your voice is this little thing inside you that you have like thousands of things trying to suppress that, whether it's your friends telling you what you need to do, teachers that tell you you have to do this to get that. It's, you know, what your peers are doing, kind of be like, oh, like they're interning at HBO, so I have to do that. But your voice is really like, to me, now it's just like, it's when you take a walk and you're like, oh, like my parents are in their mid-60s and I'm scared of, you know, them aging, and I'm scared of seeing my grandparents die, and like these sort of things that like like the things you think about before you go to sleep, the things that, the inside jokes that you and your friends have, these sort of like stupid little things that are maybe a little embarrassing, that are like, that your group chats, that's your voice, you know, these sort of like little silly things. Like, that's what DD is. It's just one huge inside joke. I was like, I think this is stuff that makes me and my friends laugh. And, like, the things that I'm questioning about my adolescence and, like, how certain things shaped me, and just kind of, like, listening to what those things emerged, and whether it was, like, shame, love. And I was like, okay, how do those feelings, and where does that take me? And, like, I think that's your voice. And I think it can be really uncomfortable, because I think I've learned that, like, if you do follow your voice and listen to where it takes you, it's uncharted territory. That's what the labs really gave me. I remember they were sort of like, there's something in you that there's like something you're scared to jump into. And it was like this sort of a well of emotion about my mom and, like, my childhood. And they were sort of like, you're doing the movie a disservice by not mining that stuff. That's the movie. And it was sort of like, oh, fuck. Like, it was like therapy notes, you know? It wasn't like structure. It was sort of like, that's your voice. And if you don't let it sort of take you to these sort of places that you, like you said, could be dark, could be scary, could be very vulnerable, could be the things that you've never told your friends because you're scared of how they're gonna judge you. Like, that's your voice. And I was like, the more you follow that, the better the work gets, but it's totally uncharted. And you're gonna be like, oh my, and that's when you're sitting there writing and you're just like, I think I just had this crazy life experience, and you look up and you're like, I'm just in my room, I gotta call somebody, and that's where the gold is. And I think, like, it's always a catch-22, because you're just like, fuck, I have so much to learn about myself as a person, and it's terrifying, but, like, it's making the work so much better and richer, and that's what the thing that I think people resonate with. And so, I don't know. That was a good.
Sean is such a special filmmaker. Let's give Sean a round of applause, because I'm just honored to be next to this guy.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you guys for being here. It was awesome.
Thanks, Ray. Ooh, that was a good dab.